Welcome back to Hardball. It's one of the most radical anti-abortion measures to appear on a state ballot. On November 8th, this November 8th, Mississippi voters will decide whether every fertilized human egg from the moment of conception should be treated as a person. That's an important label because it would outlaw all abortions. It would also make it harder for women to get in vitro fertilization procedures and a lot of other consequences. The group backing the measure has already tried to get something similar passed in Colorado twice. They failed there, but they promised to spread their personhood movement to other states in the near future, including Florida, Michigan, and Ohio, among others. According to the New York Times, that's all going to happen. Supporters of the measure include both the Republican and Democratic candidates for governor in the state of Mississippi. Activists have canvassed house to house and paid for radio and TV ads to get the word out. Here's one advertisement the group is using. Let's watch it.
Our founding fathers guaranteed all persons life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But who is a person?
I am a person.
I am a person.
I am a person.
Regardless of age, race, gender, and no matter how small, every human life has infinite value and deserves protection under our laws. Think about it.
Wow, well, the measure is so extreme, some anti-abortion activist organizations, even they have distanced themselves, fearful it would cause a backlash from federal courts. Ken Blackwell is the senior fellow at the Family Research Council, which is backing the measure. Mr. Blackwell, I've had you on many times. I'm going to give you much time today to make your case. A person, a fertilized human egg, before it attaches to the uterine wall, what would protecting that person mean in terms of the use of an IUD or a morning after pill, so-called, that would prevent it from attaching to a uterine wall? What would it do to that person, as you call it? It's very important to me to get that answer, because that would mean it applies to what some people consider legal rights for them as mothers, potential mothers.
Chris, here is what we know. Technology, as well as public opinion, has made it crystal clear that what we have at the moment of conception is a small human being. It is not a glob of tissue. It is not something that can be easily dismissed, defined, and discarded. It is a human being. What we are pushing for across the country, in Ohio, in Mississippi, is legislation that recognizes the human nature of that fertilized egg. The questions that you raise in league with questions that have been raised about in vitro fertilization, you know, are questions that are not addressed in this legislation. There will be, I am sure, consistent arguments across the body politic about the questions that you have raised. But what this legislation would do would be to recognize that what we are talking about at the moment of conception is a human being, and this would be consistent with science and consistent with a broad cross-section of public opinion.
Well, let me ask you about its implications as you intend them to be. Right now, in a woman's cycle, there will be conception caused by the joining of an egg with sperm. There will be such a fertilized egg. Some of them attach to the uterine wall and develop into young babies. Some do not attach. They simply go away. They wash away. Would you consider the ones that don't attach naturally, forget anything to do with artificial technology or science, would you consider those fertilized eggs that don't attach to the uterine wall to be persons? If they just go away, are they just human beings that have gone away and not been developed into babies? But you would consider them persons?
They would be persons. Yes, they would be.
To what purpose do we do this? Do we attach that reality?
Well, here's the reality, and let me use something that some of the reporters who have been dealing with this have been addressing, and that is IVFs, in vitro fertilization.
Sure.
Look, the reality is this, that the science has moved us back to an appreciation that there has been a business model that has been used with these IVFs and not a human life model. You know, if you go back to Louise Brown, the first baby in vitro fertilization, it was a very straightforward proposition. One egg, one embryo, one baby. If you look at what's happening in Germany right now, they're going back to one egg, you know, one embryo, one baby. What that suggests to me is that there is a debate even within the in vitro fertilization medical community about life, when it in fact begins, and whether or not we should be using business models or whether we should recognize when human life begins, and what we do is fight to give that human life every possibility of blossoming into a full productive life.
You know what I think? I've let you give your position. I think this is what we call in football an end run. I believe whatever else it is an attempt to outlaw, ban the right of a woman to have an abortion. No matter what else you're talking about here, that will be the implication under the law. There's no other reason to go this direction. That's why you're doing it.
Chris, I've been engaged for 4 decades in the pro-life movement. I am not a doctor. I am not a lawyer. I am not a doctor, I am not a lawyer, but I am one who believes in the human dignity of the human life. No different than the Pope, no different than, God bless him, Jerry Falwell, no different than millions of men and women who have taken a stand for life. This is not an end run, this is not a game, this is a pro-life movement.
And let me tell you my advice to you. If you want to stop the number of abortions in this country because you're against abortion, tell young men to stop having unprotected sex with women, discourage the act that leads to unwanted pregnancies, help people get birth control procedures available to them, reduce the incidence in which people choose to have an abortion in a free country. That would be my way of dealing with it. I do think that would be a good cause. And that's not going on.
Chris, I won't be insulted that you have presumed that I haven't been engaged in a multiplicity of movements to reduce abortion. I won't be insulted that you would make that assumption.
Thank you. I hope you won't, because that is all that we hear.
Because I have been.
Cause. They just want to reduce the rights of people.
You know me, Chris, and you know that that's not the case.
It's all I hear, though. Thank you, Ken Blackwell. Thank you for coming on. I heard your point of view, and I gave you mine. When we're joined by Michelle Goldberg, we're going to be joined by her right now, senior contributing writer for Newsweek and Daily Beast. She's written about the Mississippi measure. Michelle, tell me about the purposes of this amendment in the Mississippi Constitution. Is it to simply, in effect, outlaw a woman's right to have an abortion?
Well, it's obviously meant to ban abortion, all abortion, even, you know, in cases of rape and incest, in cases where the woman's life is threatened. I think it's really significant that Mr. Blackwell wouldn't say that things like the IUD and the morning after pill and IVF as it's currently practiced would be allowed under this measure, because it wouldn't. Once you say that a fertilized egg is a human being like you or me, you change, I mean, you're not just kind of changing you're not just changing a law in a way that affects abortion, you are radically changing the definition of pregnancy, which now the medical definition of pregnancy is when a fertilized egg implants in the uterine wall. And you are it's going to have all of these second order effects, not just on women who are trying to prevent pregnancy, but on women who are absolutely desperate to get pregnant. Some of the women who I spoke to, who I found who were kind of the most panicked about this measure, are infertile women in Mississippi who know that this is going to radically curtail their chances of getting pregnant with IVF.
I just wonder how it squares with the writings of the Constitution and people who believe in their original intent. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness relates to people who are alive and living and born. Pursuit, there's a word, an active verb. I don't think you'd associate that with a fetus. And certainly liberty is a word you would apply to people who are alive and born. I don't know what it means to say an unborn person has liberty. I don't even know how the Constitution could possibly catch up in its original intent to what these people were talking about.
And one thing that it means when you say that an unborn person or a fertilized egg has liberty is that you're saying that a woman doesn't. Because again, what we're talking about here is, you know, these people pretend to be kind of small government libertarians. It's hard to imagine a more kind of radical intrusion into people's lives. You know, they seem to want government out of our Medicare, but in our uteruses. This is, you know, forced pregnancy and kind of dictating to women the kind of birth control that they can use, the kind of help that they can seek out when they find themselves unable to get pregnant. It shows such a profound disrespect for women's liberty and women's autonomy and women's ability to make their own decisions.
I think they ought to have those million people marches for life against young men having unprotected sex with young women with no intention of having a child.
Well,
if you want to stop abortion, you stop the circumstances that lead to people to feel they have to have one. This is so logical, and they don't do it. They just want to prevent people from having a free will at a certain point is what they're really up to. Anyway, thank you, Michelle.
Thanks
we'll do
so
more
much.
reporting on this because I think it's an end run against the Constitution. Up next, the raging